Hello everybody, I'm Don Counts and we're here at the Warrior exhibit, and today we have Brenda Rolls and Linda Williams, and they're going to be talking about R.D. Bobby Williams Jr. And Linda, I'll let you start and tell us a little bit about your brother.
Well, Bobby was wounded on February the 23rd of 1966. He was taken to the USS Repose, and he passed away 3 days later. The doctor who wrote Mother about Bobby told her that there wasn't a dry eye on that ship when he died, because he was just such a, I don't know, kind of a force of nature. Yeah, he was. But we wanted to share some of the fun stories about Bobby.
Okay.
So
let's start out by talking about who he was, where he grew up, and how y'all grew up, and what got him in the military.
You want to do that? Or you want me to?
Go on.
Well, we were raised here in Lincoln County. Our mother and daddy had R.D. Williams Jewelry and Gifts on the square, and we were raised on the square, basically. Bobby loved his horses. He was just a prince of a guy. He was always taking care of the underdog. He had a friend that moved here who I am still friends with. He lives in Florida. But he moved here. I think his dad was with Butnett, I believe. And he was kind of a small guy, and he was from up north, and he kind of got picked on. And so Bobby took him under his wing and taught him martial arts, taught him how to defend himself. And the bullying stopped, and he and Bobby remained lifelong friends. And John wound up going into the Marine Corps because of Bobby. But that just kind of tells you a little bit about how Bobby was.
And then how did y'all feel when he decided to get in the military and go off?
We were just glad that he was serving his country. He was doing what he wanted to do, and that's how I felt.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
While he was over there, did y'all stay in touch?
Oh gosh.
Oh
yeah.
yes.
How did y'all do that?
Letters. Wasn't any other way.
No, back then there was no other way. When they went over on the ship, he sent a picture back of a Christmas tree that the guys had made on the ship. And Bobby said, this may be the last Christmas tree that some of us see. So it meant something to us.
Did y'all feel like he was in danger while he was there? Did you know he was in danger?
We knew he was in danger.
We knew he was in danger, but we thought not Bobby.
Yeah, you always think that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about where he went to basic training, and then what he was doing while he was in the military.
Camp Lejeune is where he went.
He went through basic at Parris Island, like most everybody else does, and then he was stationed at Camp Lejeune, and then he was in Washington as on the Marine Corps Honor Guard up there, and we've got a story about that in a minute. And while he was up there, he stood guard over John Kennedy's body in the rotunda, and I think he decided then he wanted to be out of the honor guard, and he wanted to volunteer to go to Vietnam.
He had too tender heart to be on the honor guard.
They did a lot of funerals.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's talk about. So he was in Nam. Then he goes back. He goes back for a second tour.
No.
One tour. He's been
one tour. They were crossing over there on a ship in December, and he was wounded in February. So he was not in country long.
Y'all want to just tell me about what you got?
Okay.
However you want to do it.
Okay. Well, we were starting back when we were a little younger, maybe a whole lot younger now. And we were all at the barn. We had chores. We didn't sit in the house and watch TV all the time. We had chores, and so we were at the barn working on cleaning out the cow barn. And so when me and Linda done what we thought Daddy had told us we had to do, we left the barn. And we had other things to do. And Bobby came to the door and he was hollering at us and he said, y'all get back in here. We've still got to do the pig barn. We said, Daddy didn't say nothing but the cow barn for us. And so he was hollering at us and I grabbed hold of the top of the fence and bent down and turned around and I said, pfft. And when I did, he was throwing a rock at me. It hit me in the eyebrow. We had to go to the hospital and be sewn up. And that was, and I still carry that scar today, by the way. It's on up here.
It's moved.
It moved, yeah. But
and then Bobby had a horse named Lucky, and he and Dr. Ferris Beasley were just the best of buds. And Bobby's horse Lucky had something wrong with a foot, and Bobby wanted to take him to Dr. Beasley to see what was wrong, and we didn't have a vehicle or a trailer to carry him. So, and Dr. Beasley told me the story. He said Bobby walked that horse all the way from the house down to the cattle barns, and walked that horse back because he would not ride it because of its hurt foot. And then fair's coming up, and I always think about this story. During the very first saddle races that they had at the fair, and I don't remember what it was, early 60s, it had to be.
oh yeah.
Bobby had a horse called Buck. He was a quarter horse, and Judge Templeton had asked him to break that horse because nobody could get near the horse, and so he let Bobby have that horse to break, and Bobby was going to ride it in the fair, in the races. And there were about 15 entrants in that race, and when they rode out on the track, everybody else had the big Western saddles and all the regalia that goes with the Western saddles and wares, and the guys had on the chaps and the spurs and all this fancy Western stuff. And Bobby was the last one that went on the track, and his horse was the smallest horse on the track. And Bobby had on a pair of blue jeans. I don't even think he had on underwear. He didn't wear shoes, shirt, or anything, and they almost laughed him off. Everybody just died laughing at him. But guess who won the race? He loved that horse. He sure did.
That's a good story. We were talking about your brother Bobby, but let's back up just a little bit and tell a little bit about your parents.
We had the most wonderful parents that God ever put on the face of this earth. And that's what I got to say about that.
Tell everybody about who they are. I know you mentioned R.D. Williams Jewelers, so talk a little bit about them just a little bit.
Well, mother was a Wiley,
From
and
Malina.
she was from Malina, and she was raised here. Daddy was raised in West Tennessee, and he was one of a family of 14 kids. And he was a Camel cigarette salesperson when he came through town, and Mother was working at Templeton's store. And Daddy was in there one day and he saw Mother, and he came back, and he had her show him and get down every pair of shoes there was in the store.
That would fit him.
And that would fit him. And then at the end of it, he said, I didn't come in here to buy shoes. I came in here to talk to you and get a date with you. And it made Mother mad. She said, you could have started out with that instead of having me do all these shoes. But anyway, they got married, and Daddy went to watchmaker school. But I think he went in the Navy, and they lived in Memphis because he was stationed at Millington. And actually they paid for their house in Memphis during the war by renting out rooms, and they slept on a cot in the dining room.
6 rooms and 5 were rented out.
5 were rented, and then that left the kitchen. But they paid for that house by doing that. And then they
there was 5 pregnant women in there at one time with one bath. I don't know how they did it.
I don't either.
Everybody had to have had a chamber party. That's all I'm saying.
But then they came back to Fayetteville, and Daddy he went to watchmaker school, and he had a little area 5 by 8, I think somebody said, that was in where the furniture store is on South Main. And then Dr. Patrick had his office in the middle of the square, on the south side of the square, and they were building Fayetteville Medical Associates building. And Dr. Patrick told him, said, you do what you want to do to the front. Said, I'll move my office to the back until, and so they did that, and that's where they set up business. And then after Daddy died many years later, Mother moved the store out in front of the house on Winchester Highway.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the children they had.
That's it.
We're it. There were 3
We're
of
it
us.
and Bobby.
Yep, there were 3 of us.
Who's oldest?
Bobby.
Bobby was oldest.
And then
And
me.
then Linda.
And then Brenda.
I am the baby. I will always be the baby.
And she acts like it too.
And I've got one that pledges that too, Jeannie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
All
Lord.
right, so I'll let y'all continue on now that I've backtracked on you.
Well, we took a trip one time. We had 2 little dogs, and one of them was a Chihuahua, and the other one was a
Rat terrier.
Rat Terrier. And they went with us, and we were in a Volkswagen. And I got to sit back there in that little place at the very back of the Volkswagen, and Linda and Bobby sat next.
In the back seat.
Yes, and then Mother and Daddy, of course, were in the front. Well, I saw Bobby after me and Bobby had been into it about whatever, and so Daddy had gotten on to Bobby. Well, I saw Bobby make a little sign, and so I said, Daddy, what does this mean? And I showed him the sign. He said, where did you see that? I said, Bobby was just doing it behind your seat. Well, Daddy stopped the car and gave him a spanking. And we all got back in the car, and Mother wanted to stop and get Cokes to go with the sandwiches we were going to eat at a picnic area. And so we stopped, and Bobby got some chewing gum. He actually got Feniment, and it was supposed to look like the chick, chewing gum.
These young people might not realize what Feniment is.
Well, they maybe don't.
I remember.
Well, he gave me and Linda.
Yes.
And did Mother get a piece?
Yeah, Mother got a piece.
But Daddy did not. He was not stupid. He did not give Daddy a piece, but we all paid for that little transgression.
To say, it was an interesting trip to Kansas.
Oh, good gracious.
That's a good story.
And
Well,
then
it was a funny one.
I have a story here that through the internet, you touch base with people that you don't know. Well, this was a guy, his name is John McGuire, and he lives in Virginia, and he went to boot camp with Bobby, and Daddy died while Bobby was in boot camp. And but anyway, and John was also with Bobby on a med cruise, and his daughter gave him a book, a Storyworth program, as a Christmas present, and it was for him to record his life, and he was asking there what was the funniest thing he'd ever done. So he sent that to me because it was related to Bobby, and I want to read it. He said, the event was during my service in the U.S. Marine Corps while deployed to the Mediterranean in 1964. The deployment was for 6 months, and the Navy and Marine Corps were continuously operating the BLT 12 months per year every year. They were training a battalion landing team. The primary activities for the Marines and sailors are practice amphibious landings and ground training, often jointly with military units of the hosting country. Another favorite activity were the visits to Liberty ports, and the first one was the city of Palma on Mallorca, and the second one was the Greek island of Rhodes, and that was July the 2nd through the 9th in 1964. The port of Rhodes was relatively small, requiring our ships to anchor offshore. Our landing boats were used to shuttle the Marines and sailors back and forth between the ships and Fleet Landing, which was at the entrance to the harbor. The harbor was beautiful and the docks were active with many private yachts. A good friend and fellow Marine, Robert Bobby Williams, and I, who completed boot camp together, upon arrival at Fleet Landing, decided to walk around the harbor. I thought it quite likely that we would be invited aboard one of the yachts. It didn't take long before some guys stopped us to ask where we were from. We were invited aboard for drinks and social chit-chat. Turned out they were the crew of the sailboat. The owner was in Germany on business at the time. The crew members were from various countries, Australia, England, and Ireland. We spent several hours on board until we had to return to our ship, the USS Monrovia, from Fleet Landing. Over the remaining days, we enjoyed several Navy tours in addition to return visits with the boat crew. Our last day in port was spent on the sailboat. The crew had scuba gear and a compressor on board, which they offered to let us use, and of course we accepted. There we were, scuba diving right next to the Fleet Landing and in the shadow of one of the ancient wonders of the world. If it hadn't been destroyed by an earthquake in 226 BC, the Colossus of Rhodes. And we've all seen pictures of that. The Colossus of Rhodes was a statue of the Greek sun god Helios with a height of 108 feet straddling the entrance to the port at Fleet Landing. A little history never hurts, but here's the funny part. On our final day of liberty and close to the deadline for being back on board the Monrovia, we got back into our uniforms and prepared to get on a shuttle with other Marines and sailors. However, our newfound friends decided they wanted to take us back to the Monrovia on board their 50-plus foot sailboat. Bobby Williams thought it was a great idea. I was skeptical. I couldn't quite see how a large sailboat with a very high mast could get close enough to the Monrovia for us to get aboard. Then there is the protocol for boarding a Navy ship, which is to walk up the gangplank, salute the ensign, the American flag at the stern, salute the officer of the deck, the OD, and request permission to come aboard. How was that all going to happen, I wondered. While I was thinking about all this, the boat and crew were already underway with no interest in turning back. By the way, we both probably had a little too much to drink. You had to be there to see this. Getting close to the Monrovia, Bobby has the megaphone provided by the crew, is standing on the bow of the sailboat, preparing to request permission when we get close enough to be heard by the OD. Several of the Monrovia's landing boats were tied up next to the Monrovia's gangplank, so we had a way to get from the sailboat to the gangplank without the mast getting damaged. Everything looked okay, except we didn't know what rules we were fixing to break. The time was now. We salute the ensign from sailboat, and Bobby shouts his request permission to board. OD acknowledges and says permission granted. I think the OD was smiling, which was a relief. We say our quick goodbyes and thanks for everything the crew had done for us, scrambled across the landing boats, up the gangplank. The OD was still smiling. If he said anything, I don't remember. We were looking for a nightcap, but settled for a hot loaf of bread from the onboard bakery and a stick of butter. It was outstanding. That kind of tells you about Bobby, but he was a character, all right.
He was. You already kind of covered the honor guard.
Yeah, I did.
So
I did.
You go on to
Okay.
tell that other.
When Bobby was in high school, he served 2 times as page. And he got to be friends with Bobby Kennedy.
Tell everybody what a page is.
A page is a high school student, boy or girl, who serves like a month back then. Now, I don't know how long they do today, but they go and they run errands for senators and congressmen, and I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity to do that.
How did he get that opportunity?
Estes
Kefauver was one of them, and Daddy was friends with him. Yeah. So, but anyway, so he got to be friends while he was there with Bobby Kennedy, and Bobby found out he liked to ride horses, so he invited him out to Virginia to their farm out there to ride horses. Well, Bobby was a strapping boy, and when Ethel Kennedy came out, and she brought finger sandwiches, and of course all the Kennedy kids were there. And when they got through with the finger sandwiches, and Ethel goes back in the house, Bobby tells the Kennedy kids, he says, "I'm still hungry, I'm going to go get a hamburger." Well, they all wanted to go with him, of course. Well, hamburgers at that time here were $0.25, and they were $1 in D.C. And Bobby had no idea how he was going to afford to feed all the Kennedy kids. But anyway, they loaded up in his little Volkswagen Buzz Beetle, and carried him down to the hamburger joint and got him a hamburger. And when he gets back, everybody is running around. I don't know if there was Secret Service or what, but everybody was running around trying to find those kids, and nobody knew where they were. So Ethel told him, said, "Well, Bobby, that's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But said, next time, just tell me you're taking them." I mean, he never thought anything about that.
He didn't know he
Yeah, he didn't know he did. That's right.
Oh, he also, while he was a page boy up there the second time, he dated Lucy Baines Johnson. And he had in his diary that the transportation to Lucy's house was 25 cents.
Wow. Now, who was she? Tell everybody who she was.
She was President Johnson's vice president at the time, right. Johnson's daughter.
Lyndon Johnson, yeah.
Yeah.
And when Bobby died, his name was called out in Congress.
And president, and he was president then at that time.
Yeah.
And he said, "Do you mean our Bobby?" Because, he got to know him too when he was dating his daughter. But when he would come home, no matter where, Mother may be out somewhere else on the square or Moore's grocery down there or somewhere around the square, and Bobby would always hunt her up and pick her up and swing her around and around, and that was just a thrill to Mother. The mother got
she loved her Bobby.
Yes, she did. We used to tell her that she loved Bobby more than she did me and Linda, and she said, "Well, aren't you glad I did?"
Yeah.
I'm sure his death affected her.
Oh gosh. Yes, it did. For the rest of her life.
When we left Bobby at the airport in Nashville, Mother said, we got in the car. Well, Linda remembers that we went in and I don't. So that's up in the air. But when we all got in the car to leave, Mama said, "You'll never," and Mother never said a bad word. She just didn't do it. And she said, "You will never know what hell is till you raise a son and send him to war and know he's not coming back." And I said, "Mama, don't say that." And she said, she just sat there and shook her head.
As we said earlier, Bobby went, he was in Parris Island and Camp Lejeune, and there was and I won't call his name, but there was somebody else from here that had enlisted in the Marine Corps, and he kept going AWOL. And Bobby was not going to have somebody from Fayetteville, Tennessee going AWOL if he could help it. So he came home several times to get this guy to go back to Camp Lejeune. And this guy did go to Vietnam, and he did come back from Vietnam. But that was just Bobby.
They have to tie him up to keep him in the car.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, he did not want to go back.
He was serious.
That's a serious offense to go AWOL.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah,
it is.
And the only way they'd let him come home then was with Bobby.
Yeah.
One time I was at the gift market, and I think this was after Mother had passed, and I think it was me and Diane there, but anyway, we were walking down this aisle that had pillows on it, just pillows and pillows and more pillows. So we went by this one guy, and he was shorter than me, and I'm 5'5", so he was not tall. And he said, "Oh my goodness, are you from Fayetteville, Tennessee?" Well, I thought, this is some kind of, trying to get you over here to look at his pillows and buy them. And I said, "Yeah, that's what my little tag says here." And he said, "No, I'm serious." He said, "I was in the Marine Corps with a boy from there," and said his name was Bobby Williams. "Do you know him?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And he was in the same, I guess, battalion that Bobby was in, and he knew that Bobby had been wounded that day. But they, once they take them off, they can't readily find out what happened to them. And he did not know whether Bobby made it or not. He said he feared that he did not, from what the lieutenant and them had said, but he didn't really know. But that was very strange for that to happen there.
When he was on one of the med crews he was on that referred to earlier, he was on the Riviera, mm-hmm. and he went to speak to a child on the beach, and the child's daddy took offense at that and came and Bobby told him, said that he just reminds me of my sisters back home, and I'm just a Marine, and I was just wanting to talk to your son. So he and Bobby became the best of friends. His name was Doug Sanderson, and he was from Spain, and he was an author. And Bobby, they saw each other several times while Bobby was there, and Bobby invited him to come to Tennessee to visit with his family. Of course, he wasn't here, but Doug was. And Doug came. His name was Doug Sanderson. And he came and stayed a couple of months with us. And a funny thing about, I'll let you tell that because you went with him.
Yeah. Mother she was always baking pies. And so she made some pies. Bob Burkeen, a man that used to, do you remember that name?
I remember the name.
He was clock. He fixed clocks.
Oh, yeah, that's how I remember, yeah.
And so he had passed away. And Mama said, "I want you to take these 3 pies down to Bob Burkeen." And so we got in the car and we were going over there, and he said, "Brenda, I have a question." I said, "Well, what's that, Doug?" And he said, she said, "Take these pies to Bob Burkeen," and I thought that he was dead. And I said, "Well, he is, Doug, but we're taking it to the family." He said, "Oh my goodness." So he had thought we were really, really country. Burying food with our dead.
But he had been sent here by the Spanish government, and he was to write bad things about the United States.
Negative.
And negative things. And he told Mother, he said, "I can't do that." Wow. He said, "I cannot. Everybody has been good to me in the United States," and said, "I can't write anything bad about it." Different people that Bobby served with in Vietnam have reached out to us, 2 or 3 of them. And one of them told us that Bobby was always the one that was upbeat. Said he always had a smile on his face, and he would perk everybody else up and keep them on a high. But said the night before Bobby was wounded, they were eating their rations. I think they're called MREs. I don't know if that's what they were back then or not, but it was left over from the Korean War. And when Bobby opened his, it was empty. And he said anybody else would have cussed and raised Cain, but Bobby said, "This must mean something monumental is going to happen tomorrow." And
it did.
And it did. Bobby was a prince of a guy. He loved his country, his family, his friends, his community, his horses, and the Marine Corps. And we miss him every day.
I wish we had brought the letter, the poem that he and several of the guys wrote in a.
That's on the wall in there.
Oh.
Yeah, we framed it. It's here at the exhibit.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about what happened and how soon y'all knew about it and that kind of thing, as hard as that might be.
When he was wounded, Mother was at the store was uptown at that time, and she looked up and saw two Marines coming across the courthouse square, and she knew.
And they had the preacher with them.
They had the preacher with them, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Brother
she knew,
Wyman.
she thought the worst, of course, but that told him that he had been wounded. And then, of course, they came back 3 days later to tell us. But Bobby it took him 2 weeks to get home. And
Did you get to communicate with him in any way during the 3 days?
no, we did not.
We didn't have a ham radio. You know, and you would have had to have had that.
Yeah. But his commanding officer, of course, wrote Mother a letter. And he told her in that letter, he said, if I ever have a son, I would love for him to be like your son. Bobby just had that effect on people. He was full of life. But when he did come back, we were advised not to see him. And that, to me, was one of the hardest things.
I regret that. I regret not looking.
But
because you always look for him. Mama, when people were coming back from over there, you couldn't pull her away from that TV.
And she would always go after that. She went, things don't hit you until they hit you, until they affect you and yours. But she went for the whole time Vietnam was going on. Every time anybody around here was killed from around here or surrounding counties, she even went to Nashville. She went to talk to the mother. She sure did.
She was an amazing lady.
She was.
That's where Bobby got it. And that's where we got it.
I don't know, we must have got left out. But anyway, we just wanted to share. I know we interview the veterans, but the ones that didn't come back don't have anybody that can tell their stories. So that's why we wanted to do this.
That's why a lot of them tell their stories for those who can't tell it. Yes. We appreciate y'all telling about Bobby Williams, Jr. and anything else before we go?
No.
Thank y'all for what you do here at the exhibit. And
I can tell you one thing
okay.
about the people of Lincoln County and Fayetteville. From the time that we found out Bobby had been shot, when we got home, the table was full of food.
Wow.
And it was like that every day until I guess a week, maybe 2 after the funeral.
Wow.
And people just brought, and they were just so wonderful. And then I will tell this one other thing. We had, I guess that how many Marines were out at the cemetery? 12?
12.
And then, so Mama invited them to come out and eat with us. Well, they came out to eat with us, and you'd have to know Mother. Of course, we certainly did not tell her not to do this, okay? She invited them all to come up that weekend and spend the night and bring their friends with them. So we had about 20 Marines at that house.
They slept all over the
and
floors.
We had so many friends at that time, you wouldn't believe it.
And they came, they were stationed in Huntsville, and they came for a year. Yeah. We would have anywhere from, that was the most we had that first weekend, but then after that, it was anywhere from 1 to 10.
And one of them stopped by about 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it was more like 8 months ago.
Yeah. How old were y'all when this all was going on?
I was 18.
And I was 17.
Yeah.
So y'all remember it well.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else?
There is one more story.
Oh.
I can't keep thinking of. We had several monkeys.
Oh, good Lord.
And
Real
yes,
monkeys.
We did. And the last monkey that we had pretty much was free reign, but the monkey we had when Bobby was here was Fatima.
Mm-hmm.
And Bobby would take that. We would take it out to the bowling alley because we had a bowling alley at that time, and that monkey had a diaper on it. And as long as we were holding the monkey was fine. But you let somebody come up and start grabbing it. Well, I want to hold it, and that monkey would just
Go wild.
go wild and poop all over everything. And maybe should have left that out. But anyway, Bobby went on it when he would go on dates. That he'd take that monkey with him, and they'd like be at the drive-in theater. And if he leaned over to kiss his date, that monkey jumped up and got between them and wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. It really was. The monkey was jealous.
Yeah.
What got into monkeys? How'd y'all get monkeys that in those days?
We were
Mother
in
wanted
Memphis.
one, really.
She did. We were in Memphis, and there was a Cat's drugstore. I don't know if it's still there or not, but we went
It is.
and we bought a little bitty squirrel monkey. Well, that squirrel monkey, oh my gosh. We got out at our aunt and uncle's house, and that monkey just ate Mother up. I mean, Daddy grabbed that monkey, put it back in the cage, and went back. And Mama said, "Now, Bob, don't you come back with one of those expensive ones," which at that time I think they were $100. Of course, what did Daddy do? Daddy came back with the expensive monkey, and Bobby was in the service at that time, yeah. But anyway, we started. This is not about Bobby, but we started home, and Daddy had a stroke, and he didn't have control of his right arm. But we were on 64 Highway, and every time that monkey was sitting in the back seat, and I was sitting behind Daddy, and I had him in my lap, her in my lap, and every time we'd hit a bump in the road, that monkey would reach up and grab Daddy's hair. Like he knew that Daddy was driving and causing that bump. So we didn't go long, and we stopped. And we picked up a sailor off hitchhiking, and he was in the front seat with Mother and Daddy. And Daddy said, "If you do that one," he was talking to the monkey. He said, "If you do that one more time, I'm going to hit you." Well, hit another bump. And I was trying to hold on, but they have 4 legs and arms, that they can do anything with. And he reached up and grabbed Daddy's hair again, and Daddy just kind of threw his arm back across the seat at the monkey. Well, here again, the monkey had on a diaper, but it didn't help him. And of course, here I was, 17 years old, and just picked up a sailor riding in the front seat. And here I've got monkey mess all over me. And everybody else bails out of the car just dying laughing.
Said, "Last one out has to clean it up." Of course, he was in the middle. So.
And the sailor was sitting there, and he said, he was trying to keep a straight face. And Mama looked over at him and said, "Honey, you can laugh. It's funny." But that sailor came, every time they come through here for years, he stopped at the store to see Mother.
One thing you talked about your dad being a watchmaker, that's a lost art and a very fascinating thing. Did y'all watch him do that?
I did.
Some, not a lot. We learned how to engrave at the store. We would engrave bracelets and stuff like that, but no, he had his
I guess it was very tedious work.
Yes, yes.
Very interesting. Don't see that anymore. That's very fascinating. Well, thank y'all for your time. Anything else? Y'all got any more monkey stories?
I'm sure if we sat long enough, we do.
Yeah, we would.
All right. Well, we've had Brenda Rolls here and Linda Williams. Thank y'all very much for talking about your brother, R.D. Bobby Williams Jr. Thank you, and thank you for his service.
Thank you.
Thank you.